I'd like to share with you some tips for prompting large language models. If you're using the web user interface of a LLM provider, hopefully these tips will be useful to you right away. And it turns out that similar tips are also useful for if you're ever involved in building a software application that uses LLMs. Let's dive in. In this video, we'll go through three main tips for prompting. First is be detailed and specific. Second is guide the model to think through its answer. And third is experiment and iterate. Let's start with be detailed and specific. Using the fresh college grad analogy, I would often think about how to make sure the LM has sufficient context or sufficient background information to complete the task. So for example, if you were to ask it, help me write an email asking to be assigned to the legal documents project. Well, given only a prompt like this, an LM doesn't really know how to write a compelling case to advocate for you to be assigned to that project. But if you give it additional context, such as, I'm applying for a job in the legal documents project, we check legal documents, I have ample experience on prompting LMs to get accurate text and professional tone, then this gives the LM more relevant context to write that email to help you ask to be assigned to the project. Further, if you can also describe the desired task in detail. So if you tell it, instead of saying, help me write an email, if you ask it, write a paragraph of text explaining why my background makes me a strong candidate on this project, an advocate for my candidacy, then this type of prompt would not only give the LM sufficient context, but also tell it quite clearly what you wanted to do, and this is more likely to get you the result that you want. Second tip is to guide the model to think through its answer. So if you were to tell it, brainstorm 5 names for a new cat toy, it actually could do pretty well. But if, say, you have in mind, you want a rhyming cat toy name with a relevant emoji, this is what I might try. I might tell it, brainstorm 5 names, and tell it, step 1, come up with 5 joyful words related to cats. Then for each word, come up with a rhyming name, and finally, for each toy name, add a fun, relevant emoji. And with a prompt like this, you might get a result like this, where the LM follows your instructions to first come with purr, whisker, and so on, and then purl, twirl, whisker, whisper, feline, beeline, with fun emojis added to the end. So if you already have in mind a process by which you think the LM could get to the answer that you want, giving it clear step-by-step instructions to follow could be quite effective. But finally, there have been a bunch of articles that I've seen on social media that say things like 20 prompts that everyone must know, or 17 prompts that will help you grow your career. I don't think there's a perfect prompt for everyone. Instead, I find it more useful to have a process by which you can write the prompt that will generate the result for you. So when I'm prompting an LM myself, I will often experiment and iterate and try something, like I might start off saying, help me rewrite this. And if I don't like the result, I might clarify and I say, correct any grammatical and spelling errors in this. And if it still doesn't give me exactly the result I want, I might clarify even further to say, correct any grammatical and spelling errors and rewrite in the tone appropriate for a professional resume. So very frequently, the process of prompting is not about starting off with the right prompt. It's about starting off with something and then seeing if the results are satisfactory and knowing how to adjust the prompt to get it closer to the answer that you want. I think of the process of prompting as like this. You start off with an idea of what you want the LM to do, and you just express that in a prompt. And then based on the prompt, the LM will give a response, and it may or may not be what you want. If it is, then great, you're done. But if it isn't satisfactory, then that initial response helps you shape your idea and modify the prompt and iterate maybe a few times before you get to the result that you want. So I think of the prompting process as, when I start off, I try to be reasonably clear and specific, but at the same time, I'll often start off with a short prompt that maybe is frankly less specific than is desired, but I just want to get going quickly. After you get a result back, if it's not what you want, then think about why the result isn't the desired output. And based on that, refine your prompt to clarify your instructions and keep on repeating until hopefully you get the LM response that you want. One tip I want to share is, I've seen some people overthink the initial prompt. I think it's better to usually just try something quickly, and if it doesn't give you the result you want, it's fine. Go ahead and improve it over time. You will not break the internet by just accidentally having a slightly incorrectly worded prompt. So go ahead and try what you want. Two important caveats. First, if you're in possession of highly confidential information, I would make sure I understand how a large language model provider does or does not use or keep that information confidential before copy-pasting highly confidential information into the web user interface of an LM. And second, as we saw in the last video with the lawyer that got into trouble submitting court filings with facts made up by an LM, before you counter the LM's result, it may be worth double-checking and deciding for yourself whether or not you can trust and act on the LM's output. But with these two caveats, when prompting, I will often just jump in and try something and see it not work, but then use the initial result to decide how to refine the prompt to get a better result. And that's why we say prompting is a highly iterative process. Sometimes you have to try a few things before you get the result you want. So that's it for tips on prompting. I hope that you go to some of the web user interfaces of the large language model providers and try out some of these ideas yourself. And in this course, we provide some links to some of the popular LM providers, and I hope you go play with them and have fun with them. That brings us to the end of the main set of videos for this week. There's one optional video to follow where I'll talk a little bit about image generation or diffusion models. So take a look at that if you want, and then look forward to seeing you back next week where we'll talk more about how to build projects using large language models. Look forward to diving into that with you next week.